This message comes from Discover, accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. If you don't think so, maybe it's time to face facts. You're stuck in the past. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen Report. More at discover.com/creditcard.
Just a heads up, y'all. This episode contains some salty language, which means it's going to be some cussing. You're listening to Code Switch. I'm Gene Demby. When we visited Dearborn, Michigan, the unofficial capital of Arab America and a historically Democratic-leaning city last fall, things there were tense. Voters there were angry about the ongoing violence in Gaza because a lot of people in Dearborn have family in the Middle East.
This community has never been a one-issue kind of community, one-issue vote. But I heard actually someone say, if I'm going to become a one-issue voter and that issue is genocide, I'm okay with it.
People were united on that one issue, but were really divided over what that meant for how they should vote. Like Summer Lukman, who identifies as a progressive Democrat.
If the Democratic Party does not wish to do the right thing, even after they have been begged to by some people, then I think it's time for us to consider punishing them and showing them in action, you're going to lose the election. We're going to make sure you lose.
I do not care if Harris is punished. I care if our movement is well positioned to save some lives, because some of those lives happen to be real human beings who I know.
That's Abbas Alawieh. He's one of the founders of the Uncommitted movement, which was trying to push the Democrats to take a less hostile stance toward Gaza.
And if you're willing to get some satisfaction out of feeling like you punished Harris, and that will help you sleep at night, I can respect that. For me, in order for me to try and start sleeping at night, I need to know that I'm blocking Donald Trump, because his plans are very clearly to enable Netanyahu to do more murdering.
But the Democrats did not shift positions on Gaza. And that led to a big swing from Dearborn voters in the last election. In 2020, Biden won 70% of the voters there and won the state of Michigan overall. Last year, though, Trump won Dearborn, and he ran up his margins in rural and suburban areas to narrowly win the whole state. In Dearborn, Jill Stein, who's a third-party candidate, took home nearly 1 in 5 voters. Now, of course, Dearborn's residents weren't enough to account for Trump's statewide victory there, but the scale of Dearborners' defection from the Democrats over Gaza was remarkable. And we know, of course, that in the month since Trump won the presidency again, the violence in the region has not slowed. The Trump administration has signaled that it wants to annex Gaza for the United States while aggressively cracking down on any support for Palestinians here at home. And just this last month, Israel has proposed indefinitely occupying parts of Gaza and moving Palestinians further south.
I saw my cousin, who was really big on voting for Donald Trump during the election, and we would argue about it all the time. And so I saw him and I said, hey, how'd that end up turning out for you? He was just like, Bess, I hate to say it, but, he played us.
Abbas's family is from Lebanon, and they've been caught up in the widening conflict in the Middle East. When I spoke to him recently, he was tired, he was on edge, because his family there had just survived a missile strike from Israel, and he was up all night trying to stay in contact with them.
So where the missiles struck was about 500 meters from where my family was having a barbecue outside.
Oh, wow.
And so the impact was intense, and there was, just sort of shards of whatever that fell around them.
As Israel's war in the region has raged on, a dark dynamic has emerged among some Democrats. You have maybe seen this if you're chronically online, but a lot of people are saying to the Arabs of Dearborn, Michigan, that they did this to themselves. They're saying that Arab American voters couldn't see the forest for the trees, that they should have been able to set aside their anger over Gaza to stop Trump and the unique dangers that he posed.
There was this sort of active, I don't know, maybe it was some kind of misinformation campaign, but to pit communities of color against each other, to tell Black folks who showed up for Vice President Harris to try and prevent Donald Trump, right? To tell them, hey, the reason why you lost is because of these Arabs in Dearborn. They lost the election for us.
D.L. Hughley, the comedian and sometimes political commentator, shared an Instagram post with a screen grab of Abbas doing a news interview. The post quoted Abbas saying, "He's playing us." He, meaning Trump. To which D.L. Hughley added in the caption, "Nah, you played yourselves." And the comments to that IG post, including some from some very famous Black folks, were piling on.
That clip was, spliced in a certain way and all of a sudden was being shared everywhere as, look at this guy, he voted for Trump and now he regrets it. Haha. Like these Arabs in Dearborn, they effed around and found out. They deserve whatever's coming to them.
That schadenfreude toward Arab voters who opted not to vote for Harris was easily activated, right at the surface for some Black voters who really did not like Trump and who took Harris's loss personally. And that friction has been especially pronounced in the part of Michigan where Abbas lives. Dearborn, the first majority Arab city in the United States, sits right next to Detroit, the largest, mostly Black city in the United States. And that's where we're going today, back to Dearborn, Michigan. With Trump in power now, many of the organizers who were trying to push for peace and a ceasefire in Gaza have turned their attention towards stitching together their own divided communities.
This message comes from Schwab. At Schwab, how you invest is your choice, not theirs. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices. You can invest and trade on your own. Plus, get advice and more comprehensive wealth solutions to help meet your unique needs. With award-winning service, low costs, and transparent advice, you can manage your wealth your way at Schwab. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This message comes from REI Co-op. REI believes there are places within yourself you find only outside, where you can defy your fears, find your grit, and say, I did that. REI has the gear, clothing, classes, and advice to help get you there. Visit your local REI Co-op or rei.com. This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
You may have heard that President Trump has issued an executive order seeking to block all federal funding to NPR. This is the latest in a series of threats to media organizations across the country. Millions of people depend on the NPR network. Now more than ever, we're depending on you. Please donate today. Visit donate.npr.org.
In the run-up to the election, Abbas Alawia's group Uncommitted, which we should say is run by long-standing Democrats with deep ties to the party, declined to officially endorse any candidate.
To me, the vote was not about whether or not my family in Lebanon would stop experiencing the bombing around them. I'm a voter here. I care about a whole host of issues. I also have the political awareness to recognize a very difficult truth, that the policy of sending weapons to harm and kill people like me, including my own family members, is bipartisan policy in America.
Abbas voted for Harris, and he said publicly before the election that he was going to do that, despite his frustrations with Harris's position on Gaza.
And it was a very difficult thing. I was out in community, looking my own community members in the face, community members who'd lost multiple, sometimes tens of family members in Gaza. And they were telling me, you have blood on your hands.
But that meant that Abbas was getting lit up from all sides. From his fellow Dearbornites who were angry that he would vote for a staunch defender of Israel's military campaigns in the Middle East, and also from angry Democratic voters locally and nationally who were livid that Arab Americans wouldn't or couldn't hold their noses in order to vote for Harris.
And it's my sense that there's real pain across communities. And I think we have to hold space for that pain. You know, if you have an Arab American community member or a Palestinian American community member who's like, hey, like, if your red line isn't 100 of my family members getting killed, then what is your red line, right? Like, let's hold space for that person, right? Just like we have to hold space for Black folks who are saying, hey, we do this every time. We make sure that we make the decision that prevents as much harm as possible every 4 years. Why couldn't you do the same? Can I trust you, right?
Abbas says that something shifted for Democrats between the first Trump administration, when rank-and-file members of the party were out protesting Trump's so-called Muslim ban, and today, when many Democrats are blaming Arab voters for Trump's win.
What happened between 2017 and the moment we're living in now? In 2017, Trump gets elected and there's mass protests, folks showing up to the airports, saying we got to defend our Muslim and Arab neighbors. And to now where, our family members are still being, killed on the other side of this. And the finger is pointed at us like you somehow deserve this, this level of the victim blaming. And to me, the sort of answer to that is what happened between then and now is a whole Democratic presidency that instead of, addressing Islamophobia, addressing anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian racism, promoted a policy that, was hellbent on, this idea that those folks over there somehow deserve what's coming to them. And it promoted a level of anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Arab racism that, facilitated what we're seeing now in Donald Trump just upping the ante yet again. And that was a very difficult pill to swallow. I think we're up against a lot.
Another person trying to navigate these frictions? Layla Al-Abed. She's a first-generation Palestinian American, and she worked with Abbas to start what became the Uncommitted movement.
I currently work for We the People Michigan, which is like a statewide grassroots organization.
A not inconsequential biographical detail here, y'all. Layla's sister is Rashida Tlaib, the outspoken and only Palestinian member of Congress. Tlaib's district includes chunks of Black-majority Detroit and Arab-majority Dearborn.
I'm so incredibly proud. I tell my daughters, I have 3 daughters, I tell them, like, look, isn't this amazing? This could be you. And I feel that is very true for Black folks when they saw Kamala Harris running for the highest office in the country as a Black woman. And not only because she was a Black woman, but because the stakes were so high. As an Arab American and Muslim American, even with my identity, I do not experience the same discrimination, the same barriers that Black women in my community face. And I will never understand what that experience is like. Even with all the attacks I've gotten for my identity as a Palestinian Muslim American. So there's this tension now of Arab Americans, I don't know if I can say this, but Arab Americans fucked around and found out.
Why do you think this narrative that Arab Americans are responsible for Kamala Harris' election loss in Michigan, why do you think that has been so sticky for people?
I think because it's the narrative that has been manufactured, that we've seen it very early on in social media of this manufactured tension between Arab Americans and Black Americans. And that was definitely exploited even more so after Trump was elected. And the fact that a lot of the campaigns, the protest campaigns, the Uncommitted campaign, the Abandon Harris, Abandon Biden campaigns were birthed out of places like Dearborn and were in the national media, also in some ways made our communities a target to whatever the outcome was. Because I think even if Harris had won, there would still be a need for a conversation about the ways in which our communities are divided and how we need to bring them together.
Layla had been trying to figure out how to deal with this friction. And so she decided that she would host an iftar during Ramadan, to have Arab folks and Black folks get together in the same room and sit down and break fast and eat good food and have some really hard conversations about all of this.
One of the reasons why I wanted like an in-person event or in-person get-together is because it's very hard to look at somebody who just experienced death and grief and loss by watching their family members and their homeland be destroyed and killed, and then, tell them that their vote for third party was a betrayal, given everything that person has experienced.
It sounds like what you're saying is that it's easier for folks to say this was a betrayal if the people who they're mad at are people they don't know or people who are abstractions to them.
If you don't know, like if our communities are not connected to each other, if we do not come out for each other, if there is no solidarity between these communities, it is very, very easy for us to take a page out of the white supremacy books and dehumanize each other. I wanted to, invite people from where they were at in that frustration and in that grief and bring folks together to have real conversations.
They eventually settled on a spot for the iftar, the Arab American Museum in Dearborn, a place that I visited while I was there reporting last fall. The museum became this really important gathering space for people to process their feelings after this most recent war in Gaza began. At this dinner, though, there were about 60 people, about half of whom were Black, like this couple.
My name is Tamina Rawls-Bird. I am from Redford Township, Michigan.
My name is Jarvis Lionel Bird Sr. I also reside in Redford Township.
Both Tamina and Jarvis are natives of Detroit, and not long after Trump won the first time, they decided they had to get active politically. Now they're both leaders in their local Democratic club.
Well, I started when I went to a coffee and conversation with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib back in 2017.
Okay, so relatively recently.
Recently for me. Recently for me. Prior to that, I had just retired, and we wanted to make sure that our boys, get their education, graduate out of high school, go to college, living life, trying to settle down for the run of the muck of being parents. In 2016, though, that all changed when Donald Trump was first elected, and that caused us great pause and concern.
Tamina and Jarvis said that there were some of the cultural elements for the iftar that were new to them, like eating a date to start the meal and break the Ramadan fast.
And a lot of folks that came with us, for example, really didn't know what that all represented.
Yeah, for that dinner.
For that specific dinner. Right. And they're and they're learning after each other. They really went over and beyond to make us feel comfortable.
Oh my God! They had the pita bread.
Yeah, the shawarma. It's shawarma. Shawarma pita.
And you can make your own if you wanted to.
Faktoush.
Oh yeah,
and the coffee.
The coffee was crazy.
I don't know what that was, but I drank it all.
Side note, I just want to co-sign Tamina and Jarvis. The food in Dearborn, bananas. It's ridiculous. Anyway, Layla, who put together this dinner, said that things were a little awkward at the beginning of the night, when folks were just showing up and arriving and greeting each other. But then, as people started to warm up, things got more intense.
And we had facilitated conversations, very hard conversations, because there were some folks that who walked into that event who were upset, who were mad, who were like, I'm coming here because I want to confront the Arab American community about their vote, about helping to elect Trump.
The anger with the two communities are at an all-time high right now. The Black community is blaming the Arab American community for the reason why Dearborn went red. And the Arab community is blaming the African American community for not backing them during the Gaza situation. When in fact, Black folks have always been on the side of the oppressed people as an oppressed people. So we decided to go because at least we can have a beginning or start of the conversation to see where we went wrong. So the Arab American community through Layla and Abbas are at least trying to extend that olive branch out to the Black community, and we respond in kind because we have a lot of things to get off our chest too.
These were people who shared a party, but maybe not much else. And now they were breaking bread together, trying not to talk past each other, and trying to actually listen to each other. When we come back,
we cannot ignore what's still going on in Gaza. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that's going on here that's affecting us and us alone.
That's coming up. Stay with us.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Betterment, the automated investing and savings app. CEO Sarah Levy shares why they provide tools and technology for retail investors, small businesses, and independent investment advisors.
At Betterment, there is one unifying idea, which is the idea of expanding access. Historically, great financial advice was reserved for the wealthy, and what technology has done is basically lowered the barrier to entry and created an on-ramp for people earlier in their financial journey to get access to great advice. The same is true for small businesses, where mid and small-sized businesses have not historically been able to afford a retirement solution for their employees. So again, Betterment's technology allows smaller and smaller companies to attract the best employees. And then lastly, for financial advisors, what we've done again is expanded access by automating and using the scale that technology can provide.
Learn more at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed.
This message comes from NPR sponsor, Certified Financial Planners. Asking the right question can greatly impact your future, especially when it comes to your finances. So, if you're looking for a financial advisor you can trust, Certified Financial Planner professionals are committed to acting in your best interest. That's why it's gotta be a CFP. Find your CFP professional at letsmakeaplan.org.
Gene, just Gene this week, code switch. So at this iftar, which was meant to bring Arab and Black folks in the greater Detroit area to sit down and try to really hear each other, the organizers played a movie for the folks who came. Tamina Rawls and Jarvis Byrd Sr. were there. Layla Alabed organized the whole event.
And we watched the short film, The Present, which is a Palestinian film that is about a father with his daughter traveling to get an anniversary gift for his wife, and pretty much, depicting what daily life is like for Palestinians living in the West Bank, living in occupation and apartheid, and the struggle of not having the basic freedom of travel and having to go through those checkpoints.
The film was about a man trying to get home, and him and his little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going through all these checkpoints and being mistreated. He injured himself, so he was limping. And it was just, I could relate. There's been times in my life where getting from point A to point B wasn't expedient. There was things that were between cops pulling you over for no reason, going through certain neighborhoods, things of that nature. So I really identified with it. I couldn't put myself in their shoes, but I could identify with the movie.
Well, Layla, when she was talking to us about why she wanted to have the iftar dinner, she talked about Ta-Nehisi Coates being over in Israel, Palestine, and him coming away from that experience thinking that the treatment of Palestinians was similar to Jim Crow.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
absolutely.
Which seems to be what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Most definitely. More of a Jim Crow South than up here.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, they'll give you a smile while they're hitting you upside your head. Down there, they don't care. So it was more of a Southern Jim Crow type atmosphere in that movie.
Do you think that people who were at the iftar, the other people at the iftar, were making the connections that you were making?
Can I answer this one?
You want to take it?
Yeah, I want to take this one. I want to say this. They made the first legitimate effort I've ever been a part of to try and understand where we came from. We were caught off guard when they asked us about us.
Yeah, that part.
No, we're not, as Black people, we're really not used to that. And it surprised me. You know, I was expecting to go there and talk strictly about the Arabic community's problem. But they wanted to hear about us.
They didn't dwell on the nitpicky stuff like who voted for whom. Instead, they talked about the things that shaped their lives, experiences with oppression that were different, but that seemed to, at the very least, rhyme with each other.
We were divided up in groups. And I seen, people are trying to get to know people in individual groups. Little hesitancy there because I think that the Arabic community kind of know that not the Black folks in that room. I don't speak on behalf of them, but it's no secret that they're angry with the Arabic community. It's no secret. And once they got to talk to a couple of us, they were relieved, concerned, but very hopeful. And so was I. I was just glad to see it. I really was, and glad to be a part of it. But the pushback from the African American community is that you should have done this way before now. That's what we're facing. That is the divider in the room.
That's that spilt milk.
Yep. But what I did let them know though about it in like a rated G form that the Black community is angry, but we all need to get out of our feelings and get up and do something because we're in this together. And I told them, where do we go from here? We cannot ignore what's still going on in Gaza. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that's going on here that's affecting us and us alone.
In the future, when there are more dinners like this, iftar dinners, or maybe even, dinners hosted by Black folks that invite Arab American folks, do you intend to go?
We are so into our anger right now, rightfully so. But I would go either way. Jarvis?
Yes, I would go. Food was good.
Yeah. Okay. Let's scratch that.
So I think everybody just left more with the understanding of our collective solidarity and the importance of that in order to fight the systems that are made to oppress our communities.
I mean, the kind of tough conversation that you had at the iftar, that's not really happening more broadly in the party, and it doesn't seem to be happening in the discourse. Do you think what you have done could serve as a model?
I mean, I would hope it could serve as a model, but what we've been seeing from the leadership of the Democratic Party, like even here in Michigan, is like they are very unwilling to have these conversations. They're very unwilling to take any accountability on ways that they had failed.
When Layla was putting together the iftar, she had to contend with Dearborn's notorious past. It had this proudly segregationist city leadership for a long time. Black folks in the larger region, they knew that it was a place that they should avoid passing through if they were driving, and they should be out of there by nightfall.
There's like lingering effects of that. I hear that from my Black neighbors all the time, like driving through Dearborn as a Black person, you know you're going to get pulled over.
I avoided Dearborn like the plague. Dearborn was not a place for African American people. We weren't allowed to live there. Dearborn was redlined. You would not think that Detroit was anywhere near Dearborn because you wouldn't see a Black face there. But Dearborn has changed. Year before last, I was in their Memorial Day parade.
Huh.
I would have never believed it. You'd have told me that 10 years prior, I would have laughed at you. Seriously, the Arabic community in Dearborn has changed that community so much. It's a much different place.
For Jarvis, Tamina, Layla, and Abbas, they all said that there are still so many points of contention, so many points of friction. But at least folks are now trying to talk about it. And for the people who attended this dinner, there's this sense that the fates of these two communities in Southeast Michigan are ultimately bound up in each other. And that's our show. You can follow us on Instagram at NPR Code Switch, all one word. If email is more your jam, ours is codeswitch@npr.org. And subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Code Switch newsletter by going to npr.org/Code Switch newsletter. And just a reminder that signing up for Code Switch Plus is a great way to support our show and to support public media more broadly. And you get to listen to every episode of our show and other shows sponsor-free. So please go find out more at plus.npr.org/Code Switch. This episode you're listening to was produced by Xavier Lopez and Jess Kung. It was edited by Courtney Stein, and our engineer was Robert Rodriguez. And I'd be remiss if I did not shout out the rest of the Code Switch Massive. That's Christina Kala, Leah Danella, Dahlia Mortada, Verlin Williams, and B.A. Parker. I'm Gene Demby. Be easy.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR. This message comes from Homes.com. What kind of programs does this school have? How are the test scores? These are all things parents ask when they home shop. That's why each listing on Homes.com includes extensive reports on local schools. Homes.com. We've done your homework. This message comes from Warby Parker. What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost, like free adjustments for life. Find your pair at warbyparker.com or visit one of their hundreds of stores around the country.